Hey guys, Aaron here. Welcome back to part 7 of our How to Build a Website series. In the last episode, we styled the front end and added this navbar. We also added a banner to our homepage. Since the last episode, I've taken the liberty to go through some of the pages and restyle them so that they work with our new theme. So here's the profile page. It has some user profile information along with a couple icons. And something cool I'm actually doing here is using a image generator for the profile image. So if I open up the profile.html, you can see that this image is basically loading from the tinygraphs.com image generator site, and it's using the username to generate a custom image. This is pretty cool and something you should definitely check out if you're interested in creating your own custom avatar images. The other thing I did was go into the contact page and restyle this so that it looks a little bit better. In this video, we're going to focus mainly on hooking this contact form up to the backend and sending some emails from our server. It's going to use Django Forms for input validation. So for instance, if I type an email here and it's not properly formatted, it will let the user know that it's not properly formatted. And then it also uses the Django email backend to send actual emails from this form. So let's get started. All right, so here's some of the code that I modified since our last episode, and this is on the contact.html page. I'm not going to go through all the things that I did for these couple files because it's just too much to put in one video. So if you want to, you can always become a patron on patreon.com, and I'll link that in the description, and you'll get access to all this code so you can go through it yourself. But basically, I just ported some stuff over from our old website, like some info about how you need to contact us, as well as a couple fields in the contact form itself. These are all using that existing theme that we built upon last time. As you can see here, there's a form with 3 different inputs. One's for the name, one's for an email address, and one is for a message. So I wrote all of this HTML code out based on that existing theme, but we're actually going to slightly modify this to use a Django form. And Django forms essentially generate HTML that you can use in your HTML page. And what's nice about it is because it also does validation, it will also inject HTML for errors, labels, and info, and all that good stuff. So this will be ripped and replaced with the Django form implementation. But first, we're going to create a new app. So if I go back into my terminal here and just kill the server, you'll remember that we have a couple make commands. So we had one for make, compose, manage, py. And with this makefile command, you can basically pass in your own manage.py command. Because if you remember with Python and Django, you can run this special manage.py script, which has a bunch of CLI tools basically that you can use to do various things on the site. So using this, I'm going to create a new app. But first, let's go into our apps folder and generate a new folder that we're going to use for our new app. So let's call this contact because we're going to put all of our contact related code in this folder. And then let's save that and go back into the terminal. And now we can run make, compose, manage, py. And then we're going to specify the command start app contact, because the app's name is contact, and then we're going to pass a path to the folder that we just created. So if I run this, it will create a new app in this contact folder. And if you remember from the apps episode, the next thing we have to do is go into our settings file and add a new entry to the installed apps to tell Django that there is another app that exists. So I'm just going to copy the accounts app and then replace it with contact because that's the name of the new app. And then finally, I'm just going to move around some of the existing contact code so that it now resides in this new contact app. So let's go into our contact folder and then create a new file. We call it urls.py. Then we're going to say from django.urls import path. And then let's add a URL patterns array. And inside of here, we can add a new path. And let's just set it as an empty string for now. And then we'll pass in a view, which we'll call contact here. and the name will also be contact. So we're going to have to import this views from somewhere. So we can copy the existing view, which is part of the public app. If we go into views folder here, we can just maybe copy all of this and then paste this into the views file in the contact app. And then let's remove all the stuff that we don't need. So we're just exporting this contact app now. And now we can say from .views import contact. And then the last thing we'll have to do is, if you remember from the prior videos, we had basically specified an app name so that all of our URL identifiers would be prefixed with the app name. So I'm going to copy this as well and then paste it in the URLs folder. And let's just switch this to contact. So now this URL will be referenced with contact, which is the app name, contact, which is the name of the URL within this folder. But before that, we have to essentially reference this from the main URLs folder. So I'm going to go to the root level URLs folder in Hacker Shack website folder and add another path for it. So we can just copy the one that already exists for accounts. And then let's just say this is now contact. And then we can specify contact here. And then I'm going to want to remove this from the public app. So I'll just remove the path from the URLs folder in the public app, and then go ahead and remove the contact view as well. The last thing we'll have to do is search through all the files to see where we were referencing public contact as the URL reference, basically, and then just switch this out with contact, contact. And looks like there's only 2 places, so that's not a big deal. Now we can make compose start, which will start the server. If we now navigate between the pages, you'll see that it works exactly as it did before, and everything is good to go. Okay, so now we have the new contact app. We're going to have to create a form in this folder in order to hook that up with the form that's actually on the front end. So I'm just going to right click on the contact folder and create a new file called forms. All right, inside of this file, I'm going to say from Django, import forms. And there are a bunch of different utilities as part of this forms module that you can use. And so we're going to create a new class called, let's say, contact form. And this is going to extend the forms.form class. And then inside of here, we can specify all the fields that we want in our form. So we're going to have a name field, and the name will be a char field. So we'll say forms.char field. And this is also required because I'll need to know who's actually sending the message. We're also going to need an email, which is an email form. So there are basically different types of fields that you can use here. They're both input fields, char field and email field, but one does email validation for us automatically. So that's why it's called email field. We're also going to say this is required. We're also going to need a message. And so the message doesn't need any email validation. So we can just say this will be a forms.char field as well. And this will also be required like the other two. So these char fields are basically kind of like a Django representation of the actual data that's incoming from the front end app. So you need to actually specify which widget this will be using in the front end. And so if you're familiar with HTML, you know that there are input widgets, there are text area widgets as well. So we can basically specify which widget we want to use by using this widget argument inside of this char field class. For this, we'll just say it's a forms.text input. And for now, we won't pass in any values, but we probably will later. The email field is going to be an email input because we need some front-end validation to be done as well. And then the last one is going to be a text input because it's a large message body. So we want the user to be able to write more text for their email. And so we can just say forms.text area. All right, and we'll just need to make sure that the parentheses are all closed, and this looks good. All right, so now we want to use this form on the front end, and to do that I can go back into my views file and import this form from the forms file. And so in here, I'm probably going to want this view to do two things. So if you're familiar with HTTP requests, there are several different types of requests, but you have get and post as the main two that you usually use, but there are also things like delete, patch, and update. This is just standard HTTP protocol, but for us, we're just going to focus on get and patch. So if I go to the browser and I just type in a URL like this, it's performing a get request to receive the data from the URL. This means that there's not going to be any update or any data passed to actually fetch the content from the server. But when we go into this form and then we type in some input, we're going to want to send a payload to the server. And so for that, we're going to have to use a post request. And you can basically reference the type of request with a call to request.method. And so this will return either get or post, depending on the type of request. So going back to the contact form here, I have a form. And when you click submit on this form, it's basically going to send a request, a post request, if you say method equals post, to the URL that's currently in the browser. So if I were to hit send right now, it would send a post request to the server with this URL. And so we're going to have two different implementations inside of our view for the contact page to basically check the type of request and then respond accordingly based on the data that we want to send. Okay, so the first thing I'll do here is say if the request.method is get, we're just going to render that page. Else, for now, we'll just throw an error, but we'll want to basically send the email if it's a post request. And so I mentioned before that this form generates some HTML that we can inject into the page, which handles all of the errors for us as well as validation. So we can instantiate a form and then just pass it in the context of the request. And this is something that we'll reference later in the HTML. So I'm going to say my form is a new contact form. In the render, I'm going to pass a form, which is the form that I just created. And so maybe because we're also going to reference the same form down here, let's just move this down to the bottom of the view here, and then we can do some more processing later on. And one typo that I made in my contact form is I need widget instead of with. And then the other error that I made as well was this get should be all capital. So I'm just going to save that and then refresh the page. And now you'll see that everything is the same as it was, but if we go into the HTML, we'll be injecting that new form context variable. So let's make some changes to the HTML to use that new form that we just created. If you remember from the login page, we had these two tags right here. One was to inject a CSRF token, and the other was to inject the HTML for the login page. And so we're going to do something similar for the contact form. And under the hood, the login page actually does pretty much the same thing as what the contact form is doing. It's just we're going to have our own styling for the elements here. So I'm just going to copy over the CSRF token, and then we can reference that form context variable that we injected from our view by just referencing the form variable. So you can basically iterate through this thing for all of the fields that you have in your form. Since we have this block down here, which basically represents one of the inputs in our form, we can just iterate through the fields and create a block of HTML for each one of those fields. So I can say for field in form, do something, and then after we do that thing, we can end the for loop. So for each one of these fields, let's just use this block right here. And so we won't need this label because the form already has one for us. We can reference that with field.label tag. And then it also creates a input field for us as well. So all we have to do for that is just reference the field. So it creates a label in a field. It won't have any of these extra attributes that we have on the input for the current class, but we will add those in a second. In the original HTML for this form, you'll see that there's a p tag with and some help danger text, which basically will show an error if some validation fails. And what's nice about this form is that each field will come bundled with a set of errors that are generated when the validation occurs on the server. So let's just iterate through all of those errors. For error in field.errors. And then let's just create another p tag for each one, and we can end the for after this. I do want to take all of these attributes and then put them in each corresponding field on the server-side code, because I want to make sure the input that's generated here has all the same attributes as the prior code, so everything works as it did before. So I've already done this, and I'm just going to go into my contact form. Just going to paste this in here because it's easier than me typing it all out again. And all I've done here is just add in this extra attrs kwarg into the constructor of our classes for the widgets. And these attrs correspond to the attributes on the input tags in the HTML here, the existing HTML. Now, we don't need these extra data attributes because they're just used by the JavaScript library that we pulled this theme from. But we do need things like placeholders, and if you go down into the text area here, you'll see that there's also things like rows for the number of rows in the text area. We need all that for it to look exactly as it did before. So I just put that in there, and those will get injected into the components that are created with the form elements. Okay, so I can go back into my contact page and then just go ahead and remove all of the old HTML here. I do want to keep this break and then the submit button here, but I can remove the success div because we'll probably have something else for that later on. And then I'm going to remove this extra input tag that we had in our for logic here. So if I save that and then restart our server, we should be able to reload this contact page and everything looks exactly as it did before. Now, I can't actually submit this yet because I don't have the post implementation working for the server. So if I actually just go ahead and type some stuff in here, you'll see there's an error. But we're going to fix that in just a second. To make the post implementation work, we can go back into the views .py file here, and maybe we should also check if this is a request dot method equals post, because there might be some other request types passed in. So we'll just say if it's post, we'll do something, and then else it's not implemented. So this will catch all the other requests like delete or patch, whatever. Now in the post, we're going to want to also instantiate a form, but we'll need to pass in the data from the post request in order to validate that data using the form. So I can also create another form variable here, and as part of the constructor, I'll pass in request.post. So this will contain all of the post data, and then there's a handy function on the form called isValid. So I can check if the form is valid, and if it is, I can do something. Otherwise, it'll just short circuit all this logic, go down into the return, and then pass the form errors along to the front end here. So I can demonstrate that by just saving this and then reloading this page. Now if I type in some bogus for an email, which doesn't actually have a correct email in it, you'll see that it reloads, and there is an error actually, but I made a mistake. So we can go back into the contact. And the one thing that I forgot to do here was when I was looping through these errors, I forgot to add the actual error to this p tag here. So if I add this and then go back, refresh the page, type in a name, bogus for email and then hit send again, you'll see that the actual error pops up here. And if I were actually just to submit this without typing in anything, you'll see that it has field require errors as well and a whole slew of different errors that will get propagated to the front end as well. Now, the thing that this won't do is actually send an email. So if I were to paste in something here, and say this was a correct email instead of that bogus email, and hit send, and actually I need a .com here and hit send, there's no errors, but nothing actually happens because we're not doing anything with the logic. If we want to actually send emails, we're going to have to enable a Django setting to do that. So let's go back into our settings file in the root directory, and let's just add 2 more settings. One is called email backend, and by default, Django comes with a few different backends for sending emails. The first one we're going to use is the console backend, meaning it's just going to print the email out to the terminal. So I can use the string django.core.mail.backends.console.email backend. The other setting we're going to add is a default from email. So if we don't specify where this email is from, it will use this email. And I'm just going to set this to our Hacker Shack email. Go ahead and save that. And now we can go into our views file for our contact app. And let's fill out this logic inside of this elif statement here. So the first thing I'm going to do is extract all of the validated fields from the form. So if you remember, we had name, we had email, and we also had message. And so I can set these equal to form.cleanData, which is a directory that gets created when you call validate. And then the name of the field in our contact form. So we have these 3 names. So you can just name them or pick out the same keys as the names. And so I'll just copy this 2 more times and then switch the key. And then after we extract that data, we can just go ahead and send an email. So to do that, we're just going to grab a function from the Django core mail module, and that is the send mail function. So we can go ahead and call this after we've extracted the data. And the first argument is the subject, which maybe we can just put a string with the name, saying name sent an email. The message, which would be the message that the user sent. The email that it was sent from, as well as a recipient list. And so this can probably just be the same email that we used for the default from email. So I'm just going to import that. You can have multiple emails if you want, but I'm just going to use this one for now. And then after we send this email, it'll just go down into this block right here. But we probably also want to notify the user that the email was actually sent with an alert on the front end page. So I'm just going to return the same thing here, but I'm going to add an extra context variable called success. And we'll just set that to true. So this is a very simple implementation for this. You can add more data here. You can navigate to different pages after you send the email as well. But we're just going to do this for now because it's easy. Let's go back into our contact HTML, and we can actually show something on the front end with that context variable. So I've already done this, and I'm just going to copy and paste it in because it's easier for me. So we can expose that variable using a tag here. With a conditional saying if success is there, do something. And then we want to display a alert that something happened. So if you go to Bootstrap, there's a success banner, which you can use down here. And it would look like this. So you could just post a message inside of one of these green alerts. So I'm going to copy this and go back into our HTML here. And then I can just post a message like maybe your message was sent. Check your inbox for a response. And then there's one more thing that we need to expose from our contact form, and that is some of the errors that might occur as not part of these fields. Those are called non-form errors. So we're going to add another conditional here that says if form dot non-field errors, and we can just copy that other danger alert and paste our errors in there. So I'll just paste this in here, and then we can just say that the content of this is just those errors. All right, so we can go ahead and save that. And now if we refresh the contact page, type in some data here and send this, you can see that the success banner shows. And if we go into our terminal, you can see a message was now output to the console. So, I mean, you can do whatever you want here. If you want to make this a little bit more complex, you can. One thing that I'll probably do in the future is go into my views and, maybe just make like a template for this email. So there's more information here. Like maybe in the subject, I'll say something like received a form entry email. And then in the message body itself, I would append the name of the person that sent it with some other data about like when it was sent or something like that. But for this video, I'm just going to leave it like this. The other thing I want to say here is that this form is actually not secure, meaning that anybody on the web page can actually inject scripts or HTML that get sent to your email. And since emails display HTML and potentially execute scripts, this is not safe. So what I did actually was install another package called Bleach, and Bleach has a clean method which basically escapes all of the bad characters that could cause security vulnerabilities in your form data. So I just wrapped all of these form.clean data with the bleach.clean method here. And I believe I am using the 3.2.1 version, so I just added that to my prod.txt and did a make build. Okay, so to actually send an email, you're going to have to sign up for a service like SendGrid. It's basically just an SMTP client, but I mean, there's a bunch of different services that do this. I believe Gmail actually also has an SMTP client. I think we actually use that on the video doorbell project, but you just got to search for a SMTP client and it should work for you. And then we're going to have to add a couple more settings to our settings file. The first thing we would need to do is switch out this console backend to SMTP as the backend. So this is just a different module path. And then we'll need to add in a couple more settings, and I'm just going to paste them down here. So the host would be the host of your SMTP client, which in this case could be SendGrid. And then when you sign up, they will actually give you a API key. So like when I go in here and say start for free, they'll guide me through a whole walkthrough process and give me API key. I'm not going to do it right now because I've done it in the past for other videos and I don't want to expose an API key if I don't have to. We're going to talk a little bit about secrets and how to keep this data safe in an upcoming video. So I'll show you how I inject those secrets later on. But yeah, just know that you would get the API key, you have to inject it here. And then you also you have a password that you need to send as well. There will be a port that they give you, as well as you want to make sure to enable this option for the protocol to use as well. So after you do all of that, you should see your emails being sent from the console. Again, I'm not going to do this right now because I've already set this kind of stuff up in the past. But if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer it. I think that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk about how to use Kubernetes to deploy the application to the cloud. And that will deploy all the components for our app to run properly, and we'll be able to update it by a click of a button. If you are missing some of the code or you want to see what I did for some of the front end on the contact page and the profile page, you can sign up for our Patreon account. It's $5 a month, but you get access to all the code for this project as well as all the 3D printed parts for some of our older projects. And the code's actually broken up by episodes, so it should be really easy to follow along and compare notes if you have to. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.